Hello, boys and girls. Greg from the Scary Spirits podcast here once again to make you another cocktail. This week's cocktail is called the Shipwreck, and it is the featured cocktail in today's episode. I'm going to start with our shaker with ice. To that, we're going to add pineapple juice, 2 ounces. Two ounces pineapple juice, orange juice. Next, we add the pineapple juice. Another 2 ounces. Sounds delicious so far. Malibu rum or coconut rum, 1/2 an ounce. Half an ounce. Midori or melon liqueur, 1/2 an ounce. Once again, boys and girls. Next, we shake. Next, we take our glass filled with ice. We strain our cocktail in there. Smells very good, boys and girls. Then we add Grenadine, 1/2 an ounce. And there you have it, boys and girls. The Shipwreck cocktail. As I suspected, very good. Definitely one for the lanai. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy the podcast. See ya.
Hunting really isn't my gig, so wilderness survival skills aren't exactly my strong suit. So I would probably have a difficult time prevailing in this week's movie on the Scary Spirits podcast, The Most Dangerous Game. But what I lack in jungle know-how, I like to think I make up for with a little logic and street smarts. Let's just say I came up with a plan a little different than the unfortunate victims who are being hunted in the film. For instance, I would sneakily circle back to the homestead. But most importantly, as much as it pains me to say this, 100% I would leave the heels behind. Cheers!
Welcome to the Scary Spirits podcast. Please be advised that the presenters may use adult language and/or discuss adult situations. This podcast is not intended for younger listeners or those that may be easily offended. So, if you're ready, let's go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Greg.
Hello, I'm Karen.
And welcome to the Scary Spirits podcast, the podcast that combines the two very different but highly compatible worlds of scary films and alcoholic spirits.
What could possibly go wrong?
Indeed. How are you, Karen?
I'm doing great. How are you, Greg?
I'm good, Karen. I'm good. Thank you for asking.
It's what we do.
I will once again remind our friends and listeners that we've, changed up the podcast a bit, order in which we do things. So give it a listen. Tell us if you like it or not. Info at scaryspirits.com.
We're old. We need to form new pathways in our brain, nerve stuff, mix it up.
Yes.
Keep us on our toes.
But you're much older than I am, Karen.
I am. That's why I need it more.
All right.
Way older. Way older.
I believe this film was your choice, was it? Was it not, Karen?
It was.
And what film have you chosen for us this week?
I'm not even embarrassed by it. I chose The Most Dangerous Game from 1932.
Any reason you chose this film, Karen?
This podcast comes out on Wednesday, the 13th.
Of September. Yes, it does, Karen.
And the 15th of September is Fay Wray's birthday.
It is.
And she's in this film.
She is.
Yes. We're bringing back Fay Wray.
As you should, Karen.
You never have enough Fay Wray.
If I was Dr. Frankenstein, I might bring back Fay Wray.
You'd just make sure she had long hair.
Absolutely. All right. So happy birthday to Fay Wray. Any idea how old she is, Karen?
I have no idea.
She would be 116 years old, Karen. And I'm sure a lovely 116-year-old she would have been.
I agree.
Might you have a cocktail to go along with this film, Karen?
I do.
Good, because that's what we do. And what would that be, Karen?
It's the Shipwreck drink recipe number 1.
I just call it the Shipwreck, but whatever.
If you go to CaribbeanCastaways.com, there's 2 recipes.
Yes, there are.
Shipwreck. So this is recipe number 1.
How would we make this cocktail, Karen?
You're going to need 2 ounces of orange juice, 2 ounces of pineapple juice, ½ ounce of Malibu rum, ½ ounce of Midori, and ½ ounce of Grenadine. You're going to fill your shaker with crushed ice, add all of the ingredients except the Grenadine, shake, 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 and strain into a glass. Add the Grenadine, raise the glass, and toast. To you, Greg. Clink.
No, to you, Karen. Yours is a lot more orange than mine. Mine's more red from the Grenadine.
Did you mix it? Because my Grenadine sank.
No, it sank to the bottom. I did, probably move my straw around. Because I
You've
didn't
probably
wanna,
been drinking it more than I have right now. That's probably what it is.
I didn't want to put my straw to the bottom of the glass and get all Grenadine.
It's reminiscent of a tequila sunrise, right? Is that what it looks like to you?
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tasty.
It is. It's definitely one for the lanai, Karen.
We have quite the list for the lanai.
All right. Should we give our friends and listeners time to make their own
Shipwreck number 1?
Shipwreck number 1 cocktail, Karen, as opposed to Shipwreck number 2. But if you want to make Shipwreck number 2, you do you. Hold on. And we're back.
Yes, we are.
Might you have a brief synopsis of this film, Karen, from 1932?
Of course.
Go on. Tell us all the story.
When legendary hunter Bob Rainsford is shipwrecked on the perilous reefs surrounding a mysterious island, he finds himself the guest of the reclusive and eccentric Count Zaroff. While he is very gracious at first, Zaroff eventually forces Rainsford and 2 other shipwreck survivors, brother and sister Eve and Martin, to participate in a sadistic game of cat and mouse, in which they are the prey and he is the hunter.
Thank you, Karen, for that very accurate brief synopsis.
That might be one of our best.
All right, Karen, what did you really enjoy in this film? What did you like about it? Anything at all? Were you pleasantly surprised about anything? Tell us, what did you like?
I really liked the sets. I thought they were really good. Even the outdoor scenes looked like they were outside, and I don't think they were. Very extravagant, very lush, jungle-looking sets. Even the castle or the house, home of the Count almost looks like Dracula or something, the gothicness of it. I thought the story was very interesting. I read somewhere this is the first or one of the first of this trope where people are hunting people.
Mm-hmm.
So it must have been quite shocking in the day, because now we see this in almost all forms in some way or another. It's something we see often. We're not surprised by it. It's still psychologically scary, I think, to think about it. And I think, what would be my strategy? What would I do? Those kind of things. But I think at the time it was probably quite shocking. I think the actor who played the Count was a little over the top, but still very menacing. I think of the group, he was the best. What about you? What did you like?
I agree with the sets, although it was obvious to me that some of the wide shots when our hero walks into the castle the first time, it's obviously a matte painting right behind him. But they did do a good job of, in the close-up shots later, you believed it was what we were seeing before, like the staircase they had constructed for him to whatever walk on. Hell, it may have been only 10 feet long, but it looked like the one in the matte painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
The outdoor scenes, I agree, were very good. Of course, it's black and white, so one very
That's
green.
Helpful. But the Shipwreck was even good, I thought.
Yeah, Shipwreck was good. The waterfall scene at the end, again, obviously superimposed, but I'll bet for the time, like on a big screen, it was impressive.
I agree.
I like the dogs too. They were all awesome actors, except for those two that were fighting each other.
Yes.
That's my line.
Two of them got a little more into it. Stop blocking me.
You're taking up my screen time. This is my close up.
You're blocking my light. But yes, they were good. Great Danes. Back when they used to crop the ears, which they don't do anymore on Great Danes, but they used to do that.
Why wouldn't they do it now, Karen?
Because it's kind of torture.
That must be a very new thing, because I had friends in elementary school who had Great Danes and their ears were cropped.
Some are, but it's out of fashion now, especially with the Great Danes. Other breeds, it's still done. Dobermans most often. It's quite the process if you ever had to do it. You have to tape them, and they have to wear little Shriner hats, and it's difficult, and it's not necessary. Most AKC shows, it doesn't really make a difference to the dog's structure.
I think it makes them look better.
It does make them more intimidating, but it's
more regal.
But they don't generally do it that much, and it is fairly new. You're right.
Okay, I thought the acting was good. I thought the Count, he was written that way, Karen. He had a lot of lines. He had more lines than anyone in the film, and I think he had to read them the way he did.
Well, yeah, he had to be
menacing.
Yes, and
shady,
kind of crazy.
Yes.
He had that look about him. He didn't always look people in the eye. He did kind of look like he was reading sometimes, but I think he pulled it. He went right up to the verge of over the top, kind of hung around over the top, but I don't think he went over the top. I think he went right up to it.
I agree. I thought the wardrobe was very good. I thought Fay Wray looked very, very beautiful in her gown.
She did.
Her hair wasn't great, but
it was short, but it looked fine. There were some shots where she looked really pretty, I thought.
There were.
Did you like the shark scene when the ship sinks?
Mm-hmm. It was good editing. Even had I guess we were supposed to assume it's blood, even though it's black and white in the water.
I think that was something else I should have mentioned. They did have nice details in it, like the blood in the water of the shipwreck, or the knocker on the door is very detailed. There's a lot of little details in it that make it seem like a higher budget film than it probably was.
Okay.
Either they were really good filmmakers, or they tried to add, like her gown, the door knocker, the blood in the water, the sets, all of those things.
It's the only gown she wears in the whole movie, right? She's got one outfit.
Yes. Well, they all do.
It does get torn up near the end.
Yes.
which I didn't hate either. What'd you think of the music, Karen?
It was right up to over the top, too. But I think it's the style of the movie. I haven't watched enough movies in that era to comment.
Well,
But
I think, well, it's soon after the silent age, right? When all you had was music. So I think in these early 30s films, sometimes the music is too loud and there may be too much of it. And
but they're easing
overplays,
people into the talkies, right?
I guess.
They're having that familiarity, but also people talking.
Anything you didn't like, Karen?
I will say it was a little slow in the beginning. It took a long time to get to where the action kind of started.
And it's only 61 minutes long.
Right. So over 30 minutes of kind of banging you over the head with the foreshadowing and some of the lines, they're kind of beating you over the head. Well, how would you feel if you were the hunted instead of the hunter? And I'm a hunter. And it just seemed a little, okay, I get it. Leave some subtlety in there. It was not subtle at all. It was very, this is what's going to happen. And there is kind of a twist at the end, but it's not a surprising one.
Okay.
I guess his brutality at the end was a little surprising because
whose brutality?
Bob's.
Bob's?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think so.
Well, it's not inappropriate so much, but he's a little preachy at some points about how a man should conduct himself in a hunt and all of that, and how humans shouldn't be the victims and all that. There's a couple of times he's very, what's the word? Not preachy, but
holier than thou.
Yes, like he's kind of got the moral high ground, and then that all goes to crap, which is understandable.
Well, yeah,
it's
circumstances. You got to do what you got to do.
Human nature, but
it's kill or be killed at some point, Karen, isn't it?
Sorta.
Really,
could have gotten away without it. I think, just from the way they present him earlier, it's a little. He's a little preachy, and then he
knocked him over the head with a candlestick.
I don't know,
and
but
the servants and escaped to the boat.
He's preachy, and then he just does what the other guy was doing anyway, but just more directly, without the cat and mouse. He just kind of, like I said, it doesn't bother me. It's just
mano a mano, Karen. There.
And speaking of that, I thought it was a little macho. It's a macho movie where two men are fighting over the girl, kind of in the most basic form.
I mean, it's
like whip it out because I'm the better hunter. I'm the better hunter. It's like, yeah, okay. So that part was a little.
They don't come out and say it, but that's really what they're fighting over, right?
Yes.
In the end.
I mean, yes, because, he's known her for 5 minutes, so he's in love, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the feeling is mutual, Karen.
But she's treated like an object to win and possess. And they even bargain, well, if you win, you can have this prize. And both of them say that, if you win, you can have the prize. She's not theirs to give away, but they both say it. Like she has no say in what happens.
He doesn't really say she's yours. He says you're both free if you win.
No, they actually say it.
Right.
Because they talk about after the kill, there's the love.
I believe there's a Deep Purple lyric that says, it's not the kill, it's the thrill of the chase.
I don't know. This guy seemed to like the kill.
They're perfect strangers, I believe.
But other than that, there's not really, those are kind of details. Overall, I thought it was a really good movie.
I agree. It was well done.
Again, especially if you were seeing it for the first time, where this kind of trope that we consider now a trope is actually happening. I think it would be shocking.
Anything else?
No, I'd say definitely see it if you have the chance.
So what kind of cocktail rating you want to give it, Karen?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd say a 3.
I agree.
I think if we'd have seen it when it came out, I bet we would have given it a 2.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking 2.5.
But I think since we've seen so many movies that have this in it, I don't think it shocks us the same.
And once again, boys and girls, 1 cocktail is the highest rating and 5 is the lowest. So this is the 3, right in the middle.
It's a strong 3, though.
It is a strong 3. Would you like to hear some reviews from the Times, Karen?
Oh,
From
you found some from 1932?
32 and 31, actually.
Nice. Go to the
Yes.
Critics' Corner. What do they got? That's not Roger Ebert.
No, it is not. But I will say first that this has a 7.1 out of 10 rating on IMDb, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes,
Wow.
and 76% of Google users like this movie.
Hmm.
So it's pretty high,
Yeah.
70 and above.
That's passing.
First review I have here is from the New York Times, Karen. November 21st, 1932. And I will paraphrase, although I will read most of it. It's not that long. The most dangerous game makes a highly satisfactory melodrama. It has the much desired virtue of originality, which in no small measure compensates for some of its gruesome ideas and its weird plot. It is concerned with the strange conduct of Mad Russian, known as Count Zaroff, a big game hunter who is impersonated by Mr. Banks. Impersonated. He's impersonating him. He's not portraying him. He's impersonating. I think that's funny. Zaroff talks rationally, but he happens to have become mentally unhinged through life in the wilds. As he put it, a terrible thought crept like a snake into my mind. Hunting was beginning to bore me. He goes on to explain to Bob and Eva, survivors of two different shipwrecks near the small island on which the Count makes his home, that finding no thrill in hunting tigers, leopards, or jaguars, he appreciated that he needed a new animal. So he turns to hunting men, letting them loose on his estate, which is no larger than a deer park, with a knife, declared by the madman to be equal to the fangs and claws of wild beasts. He is in the habit of giving his quarry time enough to hide and then starting out with his bow and arrow. He may use a high-powered rifle if the fancy strikes him, and in the event that his man succeeds in avoiding him for a certain number of hours, he gives the hunted one his freedom. Another point in this Count's favor is that while he delights in killing the male, he never injures the female, Karen, preferring to capture the latter alive. Mr. Bank makes his strange Count really interesting. In fact, his portrayal is so good that both Joel McCrea and Fay Wray, who impersonate, respectively, Rainsford and Miss Towbridge, Bob and Eve, are quite overshadowed. They depend merely on their youth, agility, and good looks to elicit sympathy. Miss Wray and Mr. McCrea seem to be far too cheerful during many of the exciting incidents. Mr. McCrea as Rainsford is the sole survivor of a wreck, yet Rainsford looks as if all that was bothering him as he enters the Count's home was getting some food. Subsequently, there is a reason for Rainsford's composure, for he is adjured by Zaroff to assume an ease he does not feel so as not to perturb Miss Towbridge.
So he liked it.
I think so. Next one I have is from Variety, Karen. And this one is from December 31st, 1931. So I don't know how that worked. And I'll read this whole thing because it's short. Fantastic would-be thriller whose efforts at horrifying are not effective. That's your brief summary. A crazy Russian count who derives more pleasure from hunting human beings than lions and tigers since a wild bull kicked him in the head is this one's baby-scaring Frankenstein. He operates alone on a deserted tropical isle using shipwrecked victims for game. When he gets them, he fattens them up. The routine then is to send them out on the jungle-like isle with a few hours start. It's a foregone cinch that Joel McCrea, as a big game hunter on his way to India when tossed into the Count's trap, will hand the man hunter a trimming. It looks for a moment like the Count wins this one too, when McCrea goes over the waterfall with a hunting dog at his throat. The producers have heretofore specialized in animal films with a more or less natural background. This time they stick mostly to the studio, and although the swamp and jungle settings serve, considering the limitation, they're frequently obviously phony, Karen.
I didn't really think so.
Banks grabs everything worth grabbing among performance honors. Fay Wray has no opportunity to be anything but decorative.
I kind of agree with that.
With McCree and Robert Armstrong as goose-guzzling simpleton, miscasting is evident. So Variety didn't like it so much.
I agree that Fay didn't have much to do, but she doesn't in a lot of her movies. I think we've mentioned that before about her.
Even the movies that have a strong woman character, it's not usually her, the ones we've done anyway, right?
True.
All right, Karen, are you ready to get into this film scene by scene and break it down?
Yes.
Okay. The Most Dangerous Game from 1932. Where did you watch this film, Karen?
I watched it on Tubi.
Was it free?
It was free. There were only 2 breaks, but they were pretty long ads, but only twice.
I watched it on Wikipedia for free as well, and there were no breaks.
It's nice.
It was a little dark.
I started to watch it on YouTube, and I got an ad in the first 5 minutes, and the quality wasn't great. So when I went to Tubi, it was much better quality.
Okay, and it is available on Amazon Prime as well for a couple bucks, right?
Yeah, I think it's $1.99.
But we're cheap like that. So the first thing we see is that it's an RKO radio picture, Karen. No warnings or anything, Karen. Do you have any warnings?
I did not.
About smoking and alcohol use. And we have credits. During the credits, we see a door knocker quite a bit.
Yeah, you know what's on the door knocker. It's kind of grisly door knocker, and it's big, and you see it on a heavy wooden door.
Yeah, tell us what's on it, because I have something to say about it.
It's a centaur.
Centaur holding
a woman
with an arrow through its chest, right?
The centaur has an arrow through his chest, yeah.
Yeah. And I told myself that arrow would never make it. It would be broken off very quickly from someone knocking on the damn door.
Oh, okay. That's what you want to say? Well, I was just going to tell you what centaurs are.
Okay.
Do you know? They're in Greek and Roman mythology, and they are half man,
half
horse.
Half horse, Karen?
Yes, they are. They were the children of the arrogant and overbearing Centaurus, who had sexual intercourse with mares on Mount Pelion.
Of course he did.
And produced hyper-masculine men with a weakness for wine and women and given to violent behavior. Almost all of the centaurs were mindlessly sexually and physically violent, half bestial with little access to females and no self-control, and driven mad by wine and its smell. There are no extant stories about female centaurs, but there are a few examples in ancient art. So it's appropriate. It's hypermasculinity. It's physically violent and all about women and wine.
Okay, I like it, Karen. So next we see a clock, and it's 8 p.m., I assume. Because we see a boat on the water and it's dark, right?
Yes.
It's 8 p.m. and we see men on the boat talking and drinking and smoking, and they're nervous because they're going through a channel.
We open on the captain and probably the first mate arguing a little bit. They have a map, and they're talking about these 2 lighted buoys that aren't in the correct position according to the map. So they're back and forth, and they mention that multiple times through the discussion. But they're on a yacht.
Over and over again.
Yes, they're on a yacht, and it's a group of men who I think are going somewhere to hunt. And
India, according to the reviews I read.
And the captain comes in and says he's not comfortable going through the 2 buoys with lights that are in the wrong spot. They're not in the same spot as where the map says. And the owner of the boat, pshaw, it's fine, go. And they go back and forth.
But before that, the men are talking about they're nervous, and the doctor says, well, scotch, a shot of scotch is what you need. So they all take a shot of scotch.
Yes. That'll fix everything.
Then the captain does come in, says he's concerned. The lights aren't quite right going through the channel, and he's nervous. But they call Bob up. Let's ask Bob. He'll know. What should we do, Bob?
He's made many trips before. But the captain does talk about the coral reefs and that it's infested with sharks in this area.
And Bob pretty much says, I don't know, what do you guys want to do? And they decide to go through the channel as planned.
And one of the things they're also talking about after they make that decision, They talk to Bob, and one of the guys says, well, why is an animal called savage for hunting when it needs to eat? But when a man hunts for sport, it's called civilized. So we're already starting with this over the top, banging it into your head about hunting and how the animal feels and how would you feel. They even say, how would you feel if you were the animal? So the foreshadowing is not subtle.
No, and it's the doctor and Bob. But Bob says there are two kinds of people, Karen, the hunter and the hunted. And nothing can ever change that. Just then, the ship runs aground, Karen. Apparently hits some rocks and
the coral, I'm sure, the coral reefs.
And the water gets in, and we see a shot of the captain says, I hope the water doesn't reach the boilers. Or whatever.
Yeah, it's a pretty brutal scenes. They basically boil some people down there.
You know, as soon as the cold water hits the hot boilers, the ship explodes. And I wrote, there's chaos, men falling into the water, yelling and screaming like girls, Karen.
Well, I don't blame them.
And the ship sinks. There's a few men still floating around and shark! So a shark takes out two of them, the captain being one of them.
So I will tell you another detail, and it's very minor, but it's in this scene, which I thought was very poignant and also correct. You see a couple of men in the water, and they're kind of climbing on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens a lot. And
one of them says, you're trying to drown me.
Exactly. And that happens a lot. And when you train as a lifeguard, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before or not, but that's one of the things they tell you is.
You have told us that you were a lifeguard here.
No, but when you have the training, there are two things. You don't go after someone who you think you can't pull in. Because if they're a lot bigger than you and they start doing that, you're both going to drown because you have to be able, and there are techniques they teach you how to turn them away from you, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. But that happens a lot. And it's a detail where people, they're panicked. So they're just trying to grab onto anything. And if you grab onto another human being, you're going to push them underwater. But they do that. They teach you a couple of ways, but one of them is if they push you underwater, you go underwater, you grab their legs, push them together and turn them and climb back up their body to get a hold of around their neck to pull them in. So they teach you ways to help yourself, but it's very difficult and scary when someone's pushing you underwater like that. There you go. I will say we missed one other thing that I have a little note about, and it's not that important, but one of the guys right before they have the shipwreck is playing cards.
Solitaire.
And the Queen of Spades comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that's 3 times that the unlucky lady has come up, which I hadn't heard of that before. Had you?
Nope.
But the Queen of Spades is associated with bad luck. In some cultures, the Queen of Spades is seen as a symbol of death, and also sometimes seen as a symbol of evil or dark magic. In general, the Queen of Spades is considered to be a very negative card.
But the Ace of Spades was the bad card.
Every time.
Ace of Spades?
I hear the
Ace of
song.
Spades?
I don't know any other words to that song except that. But I'd never heard about the Queen of Spades, so he was right. Queen did come up, and they were not lucky. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We appreciate you spending time with us. You know, you can help us grow our audience by following us on social media at Scary Spirits Podcast. Just look for us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to tell all your friends to find us too. Now let's get back to the show.
But Bob ends up swimming to shore. And he climbs
through
up
shark-infested waters, so he's a lucky dude.
Yeah, he's Bob. He's Bob Rainsfield or Rainsford. But Bob climbs up to a higher vantage point to see that the lights on the buoys led them right to the rocks, Karen.
Yep.
Then he walks through the woods and he finds a castle. He knocks on the big door knocker with the centaur on it.
Yes.
And the door opens. He
silently.
He enters. The servant closes the door behind him, but he does not speak. because he's mute, dumb, right? Dumb.
I don't think yeah.
And then Bob meets Count Zaroff. Bob tells the Count he's the sole survivor.
The Count says, "Are you sure?"
Count tells Bob that there are several other survivors from the last shipwreck in the house. He says the island is cursed. It happens all the time. Then Ivan, the servant, shows Bob to his room where he can change out of his wet clothes and put on some proper hunting gear.
And Ivan is a Cossack, which maybe have we talked about them before?
Nope.
Well, they were formed in the 16th to 18th centuries by runaway serfs. Traditionally, Cossacks guarded the frontiers of the Russian Empire and in return were granted land privileges. They were known to repress uprisings against the Russian state. They're known as fighters.
So then Bob goes down after he changes clothes and he meets the other shipwreck survivors, Eve and her brother Martin. And Martin's doing shots of vodka, Karen.
A lot of shots of vodka.
As you do. And we learned, or Eve tells Bob that the Count only has one boat and it is under repair. It will not be ready for a few days. I think it's Eve that tells him that because she's already heard the story. And then we learn that Bob is an author and that he has written about big game hunts and Count Zaroff has read them.
Okay, so wait. So the Count says, before he introduces Bob, he says, "We have a celebrity in our midst." And do you remember what Martin guesses that he does?
I don't.
He says are you a flagpole sitter?
Yes, that's right.
So Greg, do you want to guess what the record is for flagpole sitting?
I assume we're talking the modern record.
Yeah, it's from 1982.
No, it had to be recent.
That's not really recent, Greg.
Is it in hours or days?
Days.
So, okay, so I don't have to tell you. Do I have to tell you how many days and how many hours?
No, just tell me how many days. I'll give you the
23.
From November 1982 to 21 January 1984, 439 days, 11 hours, and 6 minutes.
That's
H.
bullshit.
David Werder sat on a pole to protest against the price of gasoline. But the most famous pole sitter, this is kind of funny, Alvin Shipwreck Kelly. He began the nationwide trend and would become America's most famous pole sitter. Kelly set a new record in the summer of 1930 when he sat atop a pole in Atlantic City for 49 days and 1 hour.
Whatever.
But Bob is an author and a big game hunter. But okay, so now who is the biggest game hunter of all time? Which I didn't even want to look this up, but I did. And it's not Jim from Mutual Football.
No.
I'll stay in the helicopter while Jim wrestles the rhino.
And it's
Marlon Perkins.
I'm not even going to guess because my guess is going to be wrong because I can already tell from what you're about to say. So,
Jim Corbett. Okay. He's perhaps the most famous, dangerous game hunter of all time. He was a colonel in the British Indian Army, and throughout his career, he was called upon to hunt man-eating tigers and leopards. I don't really believe that. I don't think many tigers and leopards eat men unless they're being harassed by them, but whatever. Between 1907 and 1938, he killed 19.
Karen. Could be maybe there's a drought and they venture into villages.
19 tigers.
Environmental issues.
And 14 leopards. Maybe, but
survival of the fittest, Karen.
That would be rare.
Killed. Then Martin and Bob smoke a Marlboro, I wrote. And then Count Zaroff goes on to talk about his hunting prowess. And I wrote,
he's impressed with Bob.
He is.
So
he's kind of showing off for Bob.
Of course.
He's got kind of a man crush on Bob. But Eve seems very worried, I wrote. And she's eyeballing Bob, trying to give him signals. Trying to warn him. Like at one point she spills a cup of tea, and she says, "Oh," or a cup of whatever they're drinking. And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the danger."
Yes, the way she says it is kind of funny.
Then the Count explains that hunting was starting to bore him and he lost, his love of it or whatever. And we learn he hunts with a bow and he needed a new animal to hunt. And on the island, he hunts the most dangerous game. And I think either Eve or her brother says that he keeps the hunting game as a secret.
I think it's her brother. He won't tell him. And they do say that there were originally 4 shipwreck survivors with Eve and Martin, but now 2 are gone and they don't know where.
Yep. I have that later. Yeah. Eve and Bob go off to talk, and Eve shows him his hunting dogs outside the window. And then she tells him that there were 4 of them, but 2 of them have gone missing. He takes them to show them the trophy room, and they are never seen again.
One thing you kind of glossed over, but is a little important, is the Count has a scar and on his head.
I didn't care about the scar.
But he rubs the scar when he gets excited.
He does.
So
I didn't really care.
But it's from a Cape buffalo in Africa, which is the largest and most formidable of Africa's wild bovids. And you've probably seen pictures of them. But it's the only buffalo,
they're like
the only member
buffaloes.
of the buffalo and cattle tribe that occurs naturally in Africa. But he does make a big deal about his scar.
And then he claps his hands and sends Eve off to bed.
Yes.
And
she
then
can't make her own decisions, Greg. Someone has to tell her.
And then Bob says he's very tired from his long swim into shore, and he would like to go to bed as well. And once they go off to bed, the Count takes Martin to see his trophy room.
Eve tries to get Martin to come to bed. Like she says, aren't you tired? And he's, of course, drunk and knows better than his sister and says, I'm not tired at all. I'm going to go see the trophy room.
Next, we cut to Bob in bed. Dogs are barking. And there's knocks at his door.
Yeah.
And Eve comes into his bedroom to see him, Karen. She says she is frightened. She tells him that Martin is missing. And then Bob agrees to help her. They agree to meet downstairs in the trophy room in 5 minutes.
She also
put on some clothes, woman.
Yes. She also tells him that she saw a boat leave and come back. And so she knows that the boat is not broken.
True. So they go down to the trophy room after they've all changed clothes and are now properly dressed.
Yes, she's in a long evening gown and heels.
Silky evening gown is what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
They go to the trophy room, find the doors unlocked, and they enter, and they see human heads hanging on the wall, which I'm sure back then was a startle scare.
I agree.
Then the Count enters, and they hide in the shadows, Karen. The servants carry a body into the trophy room, and then Eve just runs right out of the shadows.
Yeah, I know.
Here we are. We're here. Where's my brother? Then Bob lifts the blanket over the body, and he just turns and looks at Eve. Nothing needs to be said, apparently, Karen.
No, it does not. Doesn't look good.
Then they tie Bob up. The Count tells him that he uses the shipwreck people for his prey. And he did make sure that Martin was sober first before he let him out.
Yes. An hour or 2 in the trophy room will sober someone right up, he says.
And the Count admits that he shifted the buoys so the lights would lead ships to be crushed upon the rocks. And the Count gives his prey a hunting knife, hunting clothes, and a full day's head start, he says. It's fair, he says. And the Count tries to get Bob to join him in the next hunt.
Yes, he sees him as an equal, as someone who would see the world in the same way that he does. And
Hunter
Bob
or hunted.
Yes, they're both hunters. They say that multiple times.
Bob refuses. Then the Count decides to hunt Bob. Count takes Bob out and gives him a knife. Then Eve runs out screaming for Bob. Count says after he kills Bob, he will take Eve. Eve asks to go with Bob, but he refuses. Count says if he does not find them within, is it 24 hours? He gives them a time. I assume it's about 24 hours.
It's not that long. Well, it is about 24 hours because it's 4:30 and the sun is about to rise and they have to survive until the sun rises. So yes, 24 hours.
Yeah. And then they will both be free. And then Bob agrees to let Eve go with him.
In her heels and gown.
So then we see Bob and Eve traveling through the jungle.
Okay, stop for a minute. Besides the inappropriate evening wear, I'm just curious, what would your plan be if somebody's going to hunt you and they know the whole area, and they pretty much are going to know all the hiding places and stuff? What's your plan?
Well, so here's what I had next. Bob climbs to higher ground. And when he was doing that, I was saying, that's exactly what I would do. I want the high land. I want the high point, right? So if I see you walking under me, I can jump down on you with my knife and slit your throat or whatever, right? But he just climbs up to see that the island is he wants to get a lay of the land, which is also very smart.
Right.
And this is where he sees that the island is no more than a deer park, whatever that is, Karen.
Yeah, I don't know what a deer. I did not look that up, but I assume not very big because he
No.
can see all the way around it.
Yes.
He
But
can
that would be
see.
my plan. I'll take the high ground.
I was
So
wondering
I could see him approaching.
if you circled back and went back into the house, because that's not what they expect you to do. Could you keep
Mm-mm.
quiet and lay low?
You
There
could
are a
probably
couple
find some
servants
weapons
there.
in there, too.
Right. If you're watching from somewhere
That's
and
why
you
you're
see
a
him
doctor.
leave the house, could you go back in and either hide in a closet, because they don't expect that, right? I don't know. That's what I would try. I'd probably get killed, but I wouldn't. You don't know where you're going in the woods. And once you see that it's this tiny little island, I would probably try to get back because he's going to know
Good call.
everywhere he would be, everywhere you would go. You don't, but he does.
Yeah, if I could get a vantage point where I could see him leave the castle or whatever, and then flank him.
Kind of like switch it around, right?
And go to the house, and I got a knife. I can probably take out a servant, and Eve can keep the other one busy.
But he had his servants with him. The two of them anyway. Were
Not
there
at this
more?
point, he didn't.
When he first goes out, I
Nope.
guess he doesn't. But I
Nope.
figured you could, I don't know. That's what I would
Yeah,
do.
you could probably
Anyway,
find a weapon, I'm sure. He's probably
the
got a
high-powered rifle is
freaking
back there.
He's probably got tons of weapons. He's a hunter. But right here I wrote, Bob and Eve make a love connection. It looked like to me.
I think you're late on that, but okay.
And then they make a deadfall trap out of a fallen tree.
Did you know there's a DIY for that on YouTube? Because there is.
I'm sure there is. There's a DIY for everything on YouTube, Karen. And so they watch and they see the Count in the distance heading their way. They find shelter in a cave and watch the Count approach with his bow and arrow. But he spots the trap and trips the line with his arrow. He's very clever.
He is. And he does say he knows they're in the cave. And he says, I'm not coming in there because you would ambush me. So why don't they just stay in the cave? I guess he's going back to get
for his
the
high-powered rifle.
Yes. Okay. That's right. That's what I have next. So that's why they don't stay in the cave, because he could kill them with the rifle. And he freaks out when she hears that, and she just takes off running. And I'm wondering at this point, does she still have heels on? Because you couldn't be barefoot. You could.
I
They
didn't
don't
notice.
She does later. But at the same time, you couldn't be barefoot in the jungle like that. You'd cut your feet up. But heels would be, I would have ripped the heel off,
So then they make another trap, covering a crevice, hoping that the Count will fall down into it. So they're making like a false bridge or something.
But again, he's going to know every crevice on the island.
Maybe.
But they're trying. You got to give it to them.
They hide and wait for the Count to approach. Bob is ready to pull a rope, forcing the Count to fall into a crevice, I wrote. But I'm not sure that's what he's doing. I think he's trying to lure the Count in by like moving a plant, right?
Yeah, I couldn't tell which way it was.
I think that's what he's doing. But the Count sees the plant moving in the distance and he shoots at it and starts to walk towards there, but he puts one toe on the crevice
and
it falls and he backs off. He jumps across and chases Bob and Eve into the foggy swamp where he told them not to go. Don't throw me in that briar patch.
Whatever you do.
No one will get that.
I know, but I know it.
And then the Count explains that his rifle is useless in the fog because he cannot see them. So he calls for his dogs.
With a horn, yes.
So then Bob and Eve run off and Bob tries to make a spike as he's running off of a
He does make one, yeah.
To try to stop them from being followed in the swamp. And we see the dogs come running after them. I wrote, not very silently. I would think a good hunting dog would be quiet, but what do I know?
I don't think they're quiet because they need to be vocal so the hunter can follow them. Otherwise, the hunter wouldn't know where they were.
I guess.
So they're following the sound.
But I get the feeling in this instance, they're going to kill the prey. They're not going out to lead the hunter to it so he can kill it. And then Ivan, the servant, is running behind the dogs, and he runs right into the spike, and he is impaled.
Yep.
He gone. The dogs and the Count continue on. Leave him.
They run right by him. They don't care.
We see
There's
Bob
about
and Eve
20
in the
dogs.
swamp.
Would you say there's at least 20?
Probably. Bob and Eve are in the swamp, and we see crocodiles, but they don't really care.
No, they just go right by it.
Bob and Eve evade it. And right here I wrote, Eve's dress is getting very tattered.
Right here I wrote, someone's going to die by crocodile, but no one did. I thought the next servant was going to get
That would have been a good call.
Because we got one on the spear,
Yep.
one, but no, they didn't.
So then they're running through the woods. They cross a log bridge. There's a whole jungle chase. Bob and Eve climb up a tree so the dogs cannot get them. And this is where a couple of the dogs get into it.
At the base of the tree. They're not supposed to. They're barking up the tree, and then two of them start going at each other.
Bob and Eve swing from a vine in the tree to reach a higher ledge, I guess, and they continue running. Count, his servant, and the dogs follow. Bob and Eve reach a waterfall, and Bob leaves a piece of his clothing on a tree, I guess on purpose, causing a dog to bite at it and fall into the water. Bob and Eve hide under the waterfall.
Well, there's like a cave next to it, sort of like a crevice or
a
carved out area next to it, because they're watching the water go. They're not underneath it, but very close to it.
A dog runs in and attacks Bob. He stabs it and throws it in the water. The Count sends another dog in. The Count takes a shot with his high-powered rifle and apparently hits Bob, sending him into the water with the dog. The servant grabs Eve as the Count smokes a Marlboro.
He's excited. He gets to love now that he's killed.
He looks at his pocket watch. It is 1 minute till 4 a.m.
So they had about 30 minutes? Or was it?
They had 1 minute.
They were counting. Oh, so it was 4, not 4:30.
It was 4 a.m., he told him. Cut back to the castle. Count's playing his piano as he does.
And he asks his Ahmed to bring Eve down the steps.
Now!
He's ready.
While the Count is playing the piano, we see Bob enter through the door behind him. He closes the door and locks it, and the Count turns to see him.
And he congratulates him.
He says, Bob, you have beaten me. And Bob says, not yet. Bob explains that the Count hit the dog and not him.
I took a chance and went over with the dog.
Yep. Then the Count throws the key to the boathouse to Bob, saying, here you go, all the while reaching into a drawer with his other hand. Tells him that he and Eve can leave at once. And I wrote, as he reaches for a German Luger from the desk drawer. Bob sees this and attacks him. The two men fight.
They're very athletic if it's the same actors, I thought. I don't know if it's stuntmen or not, but...
The servant jumps in and fights with Bob. Bob traps the servant with a wrestling move, I wrote, Karen. It looked like. And then apparently he breaks his back or his neck or something.
Yes, you hear a crack.
A crack. Then the Count grabs his bow and arrow and draws on Bob, but Bob rushes him. They fight and Bob puts the arrow right through the back of the Count. The servant tries to throw a knife at Bob, but Eve warns him. Then Bob grabs the Luger from the floor, and he and Eve make a run for the boat. The servant follows and begins to throw another knife at Bob, but he shoots him. He gone. Eve and Bob get in the boat, and they begin taking off. The Count opens a window up in the castle, and he looks down as the boat is sailing away, and he draws his bow. He's going to take one last shot, I wrote, but he's unable to. He collapses. Bob and Eve drive away in the boat as the Count falls out the window.
To the dogs below.
To the dogs below.
Yeah, it's not good for the Count.
He was dead already. He wasn't going to survive that fall anyway. The end. Credits.
And the door closed, which I thought was kind of cool.
All right, what'd you think of your shipwreck?
I like
recipe
the drink. I like the movie.
1.
I like the drink. I think this was I'm not embarrassed by this one.
You're calling this a win-win for you?
I am.
Well, congratulations, Karen.
Thanks.
I agree. Win-win. Not mad.
It's a nice short movie.
Yeah, it's an hour, 61 minutes.
It's not a big commitment, but it's entertaining throughout.
And you can find it free.
Exactly.
It's in the public domain, apparently.
I did read somewhere briefly that there was a lot more footage of the torture room, but they wouldn't let them use it, even though it was pre-code. There were other things in there, or the trophy room. Sorry, not the torture room. And they had more scandalous things in there, but they cut it. And that's why it went from an hour and 15 to an hour and 3.
Yeah, it lapsed into the public domain in 1960.
And the sets were all the same ones they used in King Kong.
Were they? So I was wondering as I was watching it, I'm like, I wonder if she was in the middle of King Kong while
she was in
this.
both at the same time. They filmed this one at night.
Yeah.
I mean, that's baller, right? To be filming one movie all day and then having to go and film another at night.
Because she looked very similar to in King. I haven't really watched King Kong all the way through, but the stills and things I've seen, she looked very similar. Even her wardrobe was very similar, I think. So, yeah.
But there are probably scenes in King Kong where she wasn't in them, but this one, she was pretty much in the whole thing. So that's impressive, I thought. And this is all based on a short story, which I have never read, but apparently some people have had to read in high school.
Wonder how many other films like this have been based on that same short story, Karen.
Hundreds.
I'm sure.
Especially after this one was made. And it's not even directly, it's indirect. Like even the Hunger Games and,
Running Man. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
Even when you watch things like serials, like Supernatural, they had one like this. Even though they normally, obviously from the title, hunt supernatural things, they came upon this where they found out it was just humans hunting humans. It wasn't but they put that in their series. That's how popular it is to do.
Wikipedia lists Predator as a similar film. Anything we learned today, Karen?
Well, we learned this is a very influential film.
Did you win and teach us things as well?
Of course. Don't I always? That's always a win, Greg.
Go on.
Learned about flagpole sitting.
Tell us what you told us.
That's a good, hey, I'll tell you, here's a good presentation. Learned in graduate school. Tell my kids all the time. Tell them what you're going to say it, tell them what you said. That'll get you through a good presentation every time. Most people don't know that. Trust me. Ramble on and on.
I agree.
Flagpole sitting, Cape Buffalo, the most famous big game hunter, the Queen of Spades, Cossacks, Centaurs. That's pretty good for an hour movie.
It is. And plus I got a Deep Purple reference.
You got a Deep Purple reference.
And a Motorhead reference and Uncle Remus, for those of you who know. So, yeah, I'd say it's a win-win, Karen. All right, next film, Karen.
Let's see if you can have a win-win. What did you pick?
God, is it my turn?
It's your turn, yes.
The film I have chosen, Karen, is The Thing from Another World. I believe from 1951. Yes.
Why did you choose that one?
Because I wanted to see it, Karen.
Okay. I like that reason.
We did the remake, the John Carpenter The Thing. So after seeing that and realizing this is my new favorite John Carpenter film, I need to watch the original. So we're going to watch the original, The Thing from Another World from 1951.
This movie that we just watched has a remake in fairly recent.
It does.
I wonder if they'll be more subtle in it, but I bet the trophy room is much more impressive. The Thing from Another World. What fancy cocktail do we have to go along with this movie?
The cocktail I have for us is called the UFO cocktail.
Nice. Does it have any unusual, out of this world?
Well, I'm going to need to go to the store. You may or may not. So we're going to need vodka.
Check.
Dry vermouth.
I don't know.
No, I have that. Orange curacao.
Ooh, I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Oh, you haven't? I've seen it all over the place.
Mm.
It's almost as popular as the blue, I think. Campari.
Ah, you're so mean to me.
I'm going to get rid of that bottle, Karen, if it's the last thing I do. And this was just a happy coincidence. And ice and orange zest.
So it's all alcohol. There's no mixer either. Doesn't look like.
Ice cubes.
Okay.
Orange zest.
Is it a shot or it? No.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
All right.
Like a rocks glass, probably. It's like 3 ounces, right?
I don't know. You didn't give us
2 2/3 ounces is what it is. So it's about 3 ounces of liquid.
Okay.
So plus the ice. So yeah, a rocks glass. Be good. Old fashioned glass.
Gotcha.
Or if you really fill it with ice, a pint glass. You do you, Karen.
I will.
All right. Anyone you need to thank this week, Karen?
As always, Greg, I want to thank our listener. There's a lot of podcasts out there. Thank you for spending time with us. What about you, Greg? Who do you need to thank?
Once again, I need to thank the band Verse 13 for providing all the music in the Scary Spirits podcast.
The music definitely makes the podcast better.
Anything else, Karen?
Please drink responsibly.
Yes.
Thanks so much for listening. Want to keep in touch? Check out our website, scaryspirits.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Scary Spirits Podcast. Find us on YouTube at Scary Spirits Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at info@scaryspirits.com. To help us grow the podcast, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You know, we really do appreciate your support. And as always, please drink responsibly.